Well, good afternoon. It's a Monday. We're here just to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the General Assembly. It's week 3 of the General Assembly. It's been an interesting 3 weeks thus far.
Yes, it has.
It's a lot of things that are moving right now pretty rapidly, and we've just been trying to keep up with all those things, especially the budget and the things that are in the budget. And I'm going to let you, David, go through some of the stuff, and then I'll pick up where you leave off.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, and welcome everybody. Good to be back with you. It has been a busy 3 weeks thus far. In terms of money, we continue to track the 1.4% pay chart increase and also the 3% statewide raise. There hasn't really been any movement on either of those points yet, but of course, you know, that money will wrap up and get to work really quickly as soon as.
And to add to that 1.4%, there was a presentation made and some understanding that that's 1.4% addition to the 3% that's already in the budget. And we went to each person that was on that subcommittee and we gave out a folder with a long explanation of what 1.4% actually really is, and that gave them the copy of the JLARC study in which that they recommended that. And I think that squashed a lot of that confusion. And I think right now we're still okay, but we just have to keep a close eye on it.
Mm-hmm. And more specifically on that point, it was presented in such a way that it was a pay increase for state police troopers broadly. And not the JLARC recommended 1.4% increase across the pay chart to reduce compression going forward.
I think that's where we had to really educate them. Yes. It's what was recommended in order to prevent compression, and another large $48 million price tag if you'd let it go too long.
Right.
So,
and with that, we also reminded them that we're already a year behind on the pay chart.
Right. Yeah, we're already getting compressed.
And again, no movement with respect to the 3% statewide raise.
Well, you know, and I think that's okay. It was all contingent upon revenues, and it was agreed upon in last year's budget. Which is a biennial budget that it would take effect July 1 as long as revenues were still up. And I think we're going to be okay because revenues were
definitely
up and exceeding what they expected.
Yes, indeed.
So I've not heard any conversation that the 3% is off the table. I think it's there. We just want to make sure the 1.4% stays in place. In addition to that is budget amendments that we personally asked for.
Yeah, and we have 2 of those, Bill. One relating to dispatchers and another relating to enhanced hazard duty pay.
Right. And we're going to try to interview Wednesday Senator Jennifer Carroll Foy, who graciously has stepped up to help us on those indeed. Budget amendments. And, you know, budget amendments are very tough. We don't want to come out and say, well, just because we asked for these, that they're going to occur. We want you to know that we have been working on your behalf, especially dispatchers, and to enhance your retirement benefits moving forward so that there is some gap to where you can pay the health care cost when you leave.
Mm-hmm. Something to fill that huge gap.
Something to fill the huge gap. And what led us to that was the governor had put in the budget a 9.3% increase for local dispatchers.
Right.
And so we were just in the conversation with Senator Carroll Foy about the sheriff's departments are going to receive, according to the governor's budget, 9.3% increase. And we're already at a 20% vacancy rate. So we didn't want to see our dispatchers have the parity between locals and the state. So she agreed to put in a budget amendment to keep us at 9.3%, and that's where we are right now. We'll see where that goes. We haven't seen what that price tag actually looks like.
Right.
We did ask for the enhancement, and I know that price tag is pretty high. I think the VRS shared with me today that that's $47 million to change the hazard duty pay from its current $1,407 to $1,800 this year and $2,200 the following year. And so that would be a $47 million ask in order to do that. But we're trying to move the needle here. We're trying to get it to where it's the insurance is not coming out of your retirement pocket. At least you'll have a supplement to be able to pay that.
That will be such a good thing, and we'll continue work to see that through. Additionally, we've been, in fact, we just worked on this today, Bill. This is House Bill 1563 and House Bill 1564, both from Delegate Cherry. This has been a multi-year effort. But in the last year, we as an association have been working with other associations, including the Dispatcher Association and others, to see through this idea that dispatchers also should be entitled to hazard duty pay. 1563 was the one that specifically dealt with state police, because there is a definitional difference between local dispatchers, E911, and state police. Two separate bills, the same idea, and that is hazard duty for dispatchers. Now, the measure was before House Appropriations Subcommittee today, and there seemed to be some measure of resistance because there is a non-specific JLARC study that brought some question forward with respect to the job requirement on the physical side, not necessarily the psychological side. The psychological side said, yeah, it's an extreme psychological burden in order to work in that position. Physical, not so much. There was plenty of conversation with respect to those as compared to a law enforcement officer. Right. And so the measure was carried over until next week. Each of the bills will be heard in House Appropriations full committee, and so we'll continue to be tracking that, of course, and continue to be supporting it, and we'll support it beyond, even if this measure is not successful. We've had plenty of communications, and I think that there's a real push between the organizations, including the Sheriff's Association, hopefully the Chiefs of Police, the Dispatchers Association, and the like, in order to try to move this in the direction of supporting dispatchers.
Well, and you know, that all originated over a year or so when they started looking at 911 dispatchers, which our dispatchers didn't fall under the definition of. And we've been having meetings throughout the year to talk about how we are able to have language that covers our dispatchers. We'll support. We understand the need, and we'll support you as long as our dispatchers are covered. And we've come to the table now, and we've got an agreement from locals and from us to push bills forward. So we're getting closer.
Yes.
We're hoping that this will come to fruition this year, but if it doesn't, we're going to push again and find a different solution to do that. Backing up to the budget just real quick, I wanted to reiterate the things that we watch. Of course, the academy is still there, and it's under capital improvements. But there's one other thing that I want to make clear and mention is, and that's not forgotten, is the new 6th Division headquarters.
Oh, yes.
That 6th Division headquarters is in dire need of being tore down, to be honest with you. But they need a new division there, and there is money in this budget to do that. Mm-hmm. And we've been very clear to the members that this is vitally important to that region to have a new headquarters there.
And that's
So
included in the capital outlay?
it's all included in that capital outlay,
Yes.
along with the new academy.
Very well. Very well. The other big matter from last week was the collective bargaining bill. It was heard on Friday on the Senate side. This is Senate Bill 917, patroned by Senator Servo. And Bill, there was some movement on that?
Yeah, David and I spent a lot of time last week because we were really uncertain when this bill would even be heard, because the bill has been shifted around on the docket so much, and they finally heard it late Friday evening. There was a lot of proponents there, the ones that you would expect, the teachers unions, all the AFL-CIO, all those, and then you have those that are in opposition, which was local government, school boards that set contracts, all the ones that you weren't expecting, I guess, because of the impact that it has on localities and what it has on state workers. We kind of did our opposition early. We did it with each and every member instead of having to stand and fit within a 10-minute or 5-minute window.
Bill, I think it was actually 2 minutes.
2-minute window. They had their mind made up what they were going to do with this bill. But we articulated our concerns about the bill early on. And of course, after each person showed their approval or disapproval, there was a debate that took place. And that debate, kind of fell off of what we had been talking about.
I think that our concerns, our stated concerns, really bled through in that debate.
It did. I mean, we talked about, well, if contractual agreements are so important for state workers, then why is the General Assembly members not included and their staff? There was no real concise answer to that.
Sure.
And then the one that really resonated was Bill DeSteff and talking about hiring, firing, and disciplinary actions that are going to be done by a 3-member board instead of the agency that has you hired.
Exactly.
I mean, there was just so many problems, one after the other, in the bill that we've been explaining to them for now 2 weeks, actually.
Yeah.
And then it came down to the tax issue that Mark
Senator Peake pointed out the tax issue and said, hey, everybody take a picture of where you're at right now, your tax bill in 2025, because all Virginians are going to feel it in a dramatic way. One of the things that we pointed out as we advocated against this bill leading up to this hearing was the taxes. And the Heritage Foundation shows between $2,300 and $3,000 for a family of 4 annually after the implementation of collective bargaining. And that's a lot of money to the average person. And he very well recognized that and pointed that out to the panel there in terms of where we're going, because the cost is going to be huge. We've looked at some of the fiscal impacts.
It's terrible.
That have come from counties. We don't know what the state fiscal impact is going to be yet.
We can estimate from a bill that was introduced a year ago that we weren't even in. It was $88 million for every 1% increase that the collective bargaining reaches.
Right, and $19 million just to get started.
Just to start. And if you take that in concept, when I talked about just expanding hazard duty pay to $1,400, or from $1,400 to $1,800, being $46 million. $88 million is halfway there. I mean,
just 1%.
We could do a whole lot if we just didn't have these groups there, collective bargaining, that's costing the taxpayers, because they're doing it with their money, not with private corporations' money. Right. If a private corporation wants unions, then they can have them. It's not taxpayer money that they're bargaining with.
That's exactly
and
right.
This one is, and just $19 million just to set it up. It's incredible. So all those arguments came out. on Friday evening. Now, this bill is heading to finance. We have found out that there's no secret that this bill is going to pass because, almost every Democrat has signed on to it. And of course, with them being the majority, then basically the bill will pass and it'll go to the House. And even though there's not a House version, I'm not sure where the House will be on it, but we have to assume that they'll follow suit. And that's why we have met with and talked with the chief of staff just to explain our position and how concerned we are about this. And I know a lot of people, the older guys that watch this, probably know what it was like to go to the coal strikes and what it was like to go to the shipyards when they were striking. And to think that we're a neutral body and then we're going to be lumped into a union and now you're going to be on a picket line somewhere, you don't have a neutral attitude about it anymore. And I think it just is going to create problems down the road.
Because we know that the net effect from this will be that it will be controlled by the AFL-CIO.
Yeah,
and they control all the other unions. And when something rears up and state police has to get involved, that neutrality is going to be out the window because you're going to have union members enforcing the law against union members, essentially.
Well, everyone points out there's a provision that you can't strike or prevent people from working, but we all know there's ways around that.
Sure.
And you may not be able to strike while you're on duty working, but nothing prohibits you when you're off.
Right.
They're going to insist that you have some type of protest to it if they're in a collective bargaining position. And I just think for law enforcement, it's a bad idea. So.
Very much agreed, Bill. And we have also things that we have been watching and supporting as we're going along. House Bill 2026. This is a workers' compensation bill, and it added benefits for two things: for post-traumatic stress disorder, and also for depressive disorder or anxiety disorder. Currently, law would allow only 52 weeks of treatment under workers' compensation for depression, and currently under law, 52 weeks again for PTSD.
Right.
This law would increase depression to 104 weeks and PTSD to 500 weeks. It's currently reported out of Labor and Commerce with a 20-1 vote. We've supported this bill, and I think it's going to be a great change in the law. It actually sets law enforcement and firefighters into a lesser category than other employees.
Right.
And of course, we know very well that law enforcement and firefighters face the challenges of the job and have claims at a much higher rate than the general employee that would be eligible under workers' compensation.
Well, and it goes back to what the fire chief said, and it's been your motto about physical or mental health, physical health. They both go hand in hand. And,
they do.
When someone thinks 500 weeks, that's almost 2 years. But when someone's dealing with something that severe, it's really tough just to get over it and go back because you re-trigger things. And you learn that through these studies that are done that PTSD doesn't just go away. It just gets hidden somewhere in the back of the mind, and then something can trigger it again.
Right.
So there's a lot of steps that a person has to go through in order to get to the point that they're able to deal with it. And it may never affect anyone. I mean, someone's makeups are a lot different than others. Things bother people differently. So it's really tough to diagnose, number one, but once diagnosed, there needs to be a time frame in which they can get the help.
A sufficient time frame.
A sufficient time frame.
Absolutely.
Yeah, reducing those 52 weeks. I mean, that's not a whole lot of time in order to get someone healthy and back out there working.
Very much agreed.
And it was 20-1. I mean, the House passed it out. I haven't seen a Senate version of this, though. I think it's just coming from the House. Mm-hmm. And 20-1 is a very strong vote, especially coming from appropriations.
I agree, 100%. And one last bill that we've been monitoring that we were going to talk about today, that's House Bill 2256. Mm-hmm. Bill, this is a accident damage threshold bill for the accident reporting. This caught our attention because I think that all the troopers out there would bemoan the $1,500 limit. I can't even tell you how long that's been in place. I think as far back as I can remember. But $1,500 isn't much in today's value in terms of a crash. The proposal would be to raise it to $5,000.
Well, I remember back when I was first elected in 2001 that it changed from $1,200 to $1,500.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so it's been that long.
Yeah.
And of course, if you've went and bought a new car lately, you know that those prices of those new cars have just exploded.
Oh yeah, sure enough.
And so any damage, if you scratch a bumper, mm-hmm. You can almost you might be looking, because they don't usually now. You used to be able to, if you scratched a bumper, buff it out. Now they have to replace the whole bumper because of all the sensors and everything that's in it, mm-hmm. and that cost really starts to escalate when you do that. And I think this will kind of give some relief on reports.
I agree as well.
When it comes to that. I mean, I realize that we're not estimators, but you get pretty close. I mean, mm-hmm. I think if you do this job long enough, you've seen plenty of accidents to know what the cost is to repair those cars, and you can adjust that. But I think right now with the technology that's on cars, a broken windshield with all the cameras and stuff,
sure.
All the things technology-wise that are put on these vehicles and the cost of purchasing them just escalates the price tremendously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully this will provide some measure of reprieve, in terms of reportable versus non-reportable.
Anxious
and
to
some
see,
reasonable limit, in terms of the breaking point.
Anxious to see how the insurance companies view it, how they, because they're the ones that's wanting the reports, and they're the ones that, and trial lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Bill, I was going to, we didn't have it on the list here, but we did happen to hear a bill today. It was quite interesting in the Senate courts. Essentially, this bill would require accident investigators, law enforcement officers, including troopers, to collect certain information. Speaking of trial lawyers, that information that trial lawyers really want.
Bill brought by the trial lawyers.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So basically what it would do is require the trooper, the law enforcement officer, to collect the IMEI. I believe I'm saying that correct. That's essentially your serial number on your phone.
Which, if you ask me, I couldn't tell you how to get it. I couldn't tell you what it is.
Yeah. So apparently it's fairly easy, but we weren't entirely familiar with that. I knew of it, but I didn't know specifically. And so that would require them to investigate whether or not the phone was used at the time of the crash, affirmatively investigate that. And also the carrier information. So the carrier information, the IMEI, the phone serial number, and that would go on to the accident report. And so the gist of this thing is that when they have that information, then they can send a preservation. The law would allow it to be for a period of 3 years. And the scope of the information would be anything that's on your phone for 2 hours before the crash and 2 hours after the crash.
Right.
And so the phone carriers would be required to hold that information for a period of time, that 3 years. And in that period of time, the lawyers could then subpoena that information from the from the phone carriers. for purposes of civil litigation. There was a lot of opposition to this bill.
Yep. For us, though, it was just interesting to listen to see where they went. I mean, I'm sure that if the bill actually passes and goes into law, which it failed on a 7-7 vote, it would just require another step for the trooper to record this information to put it on accident form. But the thing that I was talking to David about, what if the party's injured or killed? Then does the trooper have to get a search warrant to get the information from his phone or her phone? Which that didn't even come up in the conversation.
Yeah. Or what if the trooper just doesn't put it on the accident report, and then once they get to litigation, there's some appearance that they failed to provide that information? Because the net here is there's a penalty involved in this. So if you don't produce the information to the officer, then you could have what's called a spoliation charge against you. In the case, it says, hey, if this stuff is missing because the defendant spoiled it, then you get a jury charge in the plaintiff's favor. So the mere absence of it could be really problematic, because, like, to your point there, you get in a situation where it's not on the report for one reason or another,
right?
And maybe it's going to, down the road, it's going to come back to bite the person because
and even the trooper,
it's not included. Or another great example that came up: what about the employee that has their personal phone in a company vehicle, and they said, "You're not taking my information," and now that's going to relate back to the employer's insurance when it comes to civil litigation. So lots of problems there potentially.
Or the trooper that forgets to put it on the report, and the person says, "Well, I gave it to the trooper."
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, it's a he said, she said situation at that point. There's a lot of problems in that. Thank goodness it was not reported out, but
it may not be the last that we see or hear of this bill, don't you think, Bill?
Oh, well, I mean, it was a 7-7 vote in committee, and one member that we feel may have been leaning towards a yes vote wasn't there today, so someone that was on the defeating side could bring it back up, and then it could pass 8
and there were Republicans and Democrats that voted against it.
It was a bipartisan vote to kill it. So, yeah. But it was an interesting, just kind of an example of what you see and hear every day that you're down here, of some things that are going on. And we spoke today about the bill to further your investigation with the smell of marijuana. And of course they killed that immediately. But it goes back to 2021 when they were putting in justice reform and giving all these legal tones to criminal actions. And so when you do that, it's hard to reverse. And we're seeing that right now. Mm-hmm. As we sat at the light and we could smell marijuana permeating from the car beside us in Richmond.
Every morning.
Every morning, yes.
Every morning. Doesn't matter what time. We were early this morning.
We were really early this morning.
We still got a big whiff of marijuana coming from a car every single day downtown. Yeah. And I'm sure that others of you out there have the same experiences. It really is out of hand in terms of the usage of marijuana while they're driving around. Because we know it's an intoxicant.
We're not concerned about how much marijuana you smoke in the car while you're sitting at the light driving down the highway. But if you wreck, we want that information off the cell phone.
That's exactly
basically where it comes from.
Yeah, that's where we are legislatively. So, well, Bill, thank you so much. And
look forward to getting our interview with Jennifer Carol Foy, Senator Foy, Carol Foy, and just talk about a couple of these bills that she's carried for us. And we'll be putting that out hopefully Friday or Monday morning early. And look forward to next week.
Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.